So I have a handful of topics, themes that I thought we could cover, and I will just sort of pose questions, and if you would like to jump in and perhaps comment on it, on the topic, that would be very useful. The first area that I think is always important, and I've spoke with several people during the break, is this idea of how our institutions value international or global education. How do we know they value it? How do we perceive that value? Do you yourselves have an approach to international education? Is it mentioned in the college mission or visit statements? Do you have sort of a theoretical underpinning for your approach to internationalization? And are those approaches different when you are speaking with different audiences, administration, staff, faculty, students? So really the topic on the table is approaches and value of international education at your institutions.
You don't have to say which school you're from.
Okay.
Even though it's on your tab. But I think that's a great question because it all comes from, I think it all has to come down from your mission statement. Right. Those of us who teach business know that, it's one thing you say in your mission statement, but how you really value it is shown in your action. So for our college, we're a business college, so, global is in our mission statement, and that's why we are very intentional. And through this partnership with IU Cyber, we've been able to try to, really start with faculty, and also curriculum changes, require international business course at both undergraduate, graduate levels, but we cannot require trip. Right. It's just, we made it available to our students, but, encourage them to take advantage, but that's something it's just not feasible to really make it mandatory. And language requirement, we don't require that. Right. So there are some, as an institution, how do you show you really value international programs and curriculum? I can say about our college, but I really can't say that about it because we don't have a large international student population. That's another resource you could use, but I don't know how much, how many international students you have at your community colleges, but if we have those student population here, that's a rich resource for our local students. There's a lot of programming opportunities right then and there, but we don't really have that, and the only large population we have for international students is from one single country. Right. So it's great for them to be here and to interact with our students, but we would like to have more diversity. So I just want to say that's a very good first question to ponder. Is it in your mission statement? If yes, is it implemented, and how? Right. And is it really a value that's being espoused, not just mentioned?
Maybe we could do just a quick show of hands. How many of your institutions, raise your hand if your institution mentions global workforce, global perspectives in your college mission statement? Yes. Yeah? So, yes, you were going to say something, yeah.
Oh, yes, I was going to say, we're a community college. We're Ivy Tech Community College, and so we've had a lot of success selling our Global Studies Certificate and Global Studies Initiative in terms of preparing students for a globalized workforce. And state legislators, they want to see tangible benefits. So if you say we're going to help our students and our industries compete globally, they're more likely to be on board.
Absolutely. And is there an overt expression of that commitment in institutional documents, websites?
There is now.
There is now. Okay, good.
Because our last president, our current president, is more focused on increasing the global offerings and the global experiences of our students. We're very thankful for that,
Yes.
Could I
Sounds like
ask-
an enlightened leader.
indeed.
To get that in your mission statement, so was this part of, like, that president that you currently have that was able to get the globalized workforce in the mission statement, or was it?
It's
kind
not
of a-
necessarily explicitly said in a mission statement, but since our mission is to provide Indiana with high-quality graduates, workforce-ready graduates, it's kind of implied, so.
And you're saying that you have experienced numbers that suggest that's been successful.
We've, just in the last 5 years, we've globalized our courses, meaning that when we started our new Global Studies certificate, we've went around to our existing courses and make sure they had a global component in order to qualify for a certificate. That was an initiative, that was a new initiative started from our previous president, and it's continuing to this day. There's also efforts to try to get a associate's degree or technical certificate in terms of global studies. And this is where selling it to the state legislator and
Is
the
key.
Indiana Department of Education come in. They like to hear tangible benefits
Absolutely.
for certain initiatives.
And I'm coming from the same institution.
Uh-huh.
I'm a course developer. So from the School of Business, in our course developing and in our main objectives, there has to be some aspect of globalization in every single one of those courses. And what we're actually doing now are peer reviews of our courses to ensure that we in fact are looking at business through, you'll hear me say, through a different set of lenses, because we have to look at the world. We are global citizens, and that's been our complete focus at this point.
Which is great. So you said Wabansi, it is explicit in the mission statement. How do you see that working to your advantage and your efforts?
Well, and it is relatively new. We just approved a college learning outcome on global awareness, so it has really served as an impetus to a lot of our current efforts. So that's why I was interested in, you had mentioned that when you, in your strategic plan, that you have all of your programs tied to the 5 global learning outcomes. So I'm interested in learning more about that, because these were just implemented, this, was it?
I think it was last year, wasn't it?
They were approved last
Yeah,
year and I
approved.
think
Implemented
implemented.
this year, beginning, yeah.
So we're still working on how we're going to assess at the college learning outcome level. So, but that outcome is definitely supporting our efforts.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excuse me.
How many of your institutions have some kind of a, we call it at Harper, the World Cultures and Diversity graduation requirement? How many of you have something along those lines that would be, does it include the global component? Is it largely?
Oh, global multicultural,
Good, okay.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's the thing that people are trying to get rid of, because, the state's
Right.
coming down and we all have to conform to 60 to 64, So they're thinking of getting rid of that because they think it'll save credits, but, yeah, it won't.
So the change in degree, I know what you're talking about, but why is that necessitating conversations about eliminating that requirement?
Well, the truth is that maybe it may not be, and the campus is entirely split. But the idea is that if we can, the idea that was presented by our degree requirements committee is that if we can take away things that maybe seem unnecessary, like that global multicultural, will that allow some programs to get in line with this 60 credit hour requirement? Now, I think the preliminary studies show that that's not really going to make, because people are sort of double dipping anyway. They have to take, because a lot of the gen ed courses meet that global multicultural.
Right, yeah, that's
So,
what I was wondering. Yeah, could it be infusing that into some of those other courses that remain in those programs?
So it's a sort of false argument, but you got to get people to think on that. I mean, to agree to that.
Does Harper's College's mission statement specifically say that students are receiving a global education? Ours goes kind of a roundabout way. It says to work and live in a diverse and globally competitive environment. Is that kind of what yours says, or?
So I can pull ours back up. It mentions
Mention society.
diversity, yeah, or diverse communities, that's where, yeah. And we, hope to transform
Yes,
individual lives.
indeed. I think we all want to do that, right?
Exactly.
Is Harper College a one-campus institution, or do you have multiple campuses?
We're a one-campus institution. We have a couple of satellite
Satellites, but yeah.
areas, but we're not a multi-campus institution.
One thing that's kind of hard with Ivy Tech is we have 19 campuses, some really small, some really big. And every campus is different in terms of what they offer and what they can do in terms of global studies offerings, and resources they have. So that's a little bit of a challenge. I don't think we have one hub, and I loved your idea, one office of international studies to kind of mobilize your resources, because we have a lot of resources we could mobilize.
Well, we used to have Catherine Kent at
I
the
remember.
South Bend location, sorry. At
One
the
person
South Bend
office,
location that,
Yes.
really, I guess she was the founding person that really focused on that, and now it's dispersed throughout, so there probably needs to be some centralization if possible.
She was our advocate for global studies, like you seem to be for Harper College. And I wonder if you guys are going to experience the same thing if you ever retire or move on. Is there going to be an advocate there to take over?
So this actually sort of transitions to our next subject, which is where does international live at your institutions? Is there such a thing as an office? In my particular case, I realized a couple of years ago that I was not going to achieve my dream of a center for global studies with dual faculty appointments, academic tracks leading to transfer agreements with institutions at the department level, et cetera, language requirement across campus, et cetera. I was not going to achieve that. So I started to think about what is the transition going to look like, and how can we institutionalize that transition in a productive and efficient way that would have credibility with both the administration and the faculty.
Oh, yeah.
Over the 20-plus years that I've been there, it has been a variety of different ways. It's been chosen, anointed, assumed, and all these sorts of things. And I wanted to make sure that whatever transition occurs in my instance is lent that credibility. So I actually have an exit plan that is 1.5 to 2 years out. This year, I'm committed to overseeing the Fulbright project and various other responsibilities. Next year could be a transitional year or my final year, and then a new person would take over in the fall of 20. And I have been, I guess I can say this with my 20 closest friends, I've been, cultivating colleagues and 2 strong competitors, 2 strong champions have been very vocal and participated in our shared governance system. One of them is sitting right here at the table, Professor Khalil, and there will be a application process and a transfer of power that will be transparent and all those things, but it's going to be her.
But to speak to just that a little bit, because, Rich and I have talked, I know Rich is going to be gone, and I'm, hoping at some point to move on too. So we want this to make sure it's sustained beyond us. And so one of my 3 things in framing this and thinking about it was that sustainability. This is a sustainable program. When Rich started telling me he's like 2 years and I'm going to transition out, and we have a new president and a new provost starting July 1. Those searches are underway. So we're going to have a change in our executive leadership. So we wanted to make sure we put some systems in place to make sure that anybody can dismantle anything, but they'll have to dismantle it. It just won't fade away. So we've been moving money around to create a permanent budget for.
Cayman Islands accounts, I think there's Panama City, we have an account too.
That's right, offshore accounts.
Offshore accounts.
But it's a legitimate, it's been a legitimate I'm fortunate to have two really good bosses, the provost and the president, who give me a lot of freedom with my programming, so I've been able to look at my budgets and say, this global region of focus especially is a priority, so we're gonna make sure there are funds in there. We're gonna make sure we have a space. We're gonna make sure we put a process in for replacing this. We're gonna make sure we have these global learning outcomes, a process for student mobility and study abroad that will make sense to any reasonable, and we would think we would be hiring reasonable people, any reasonable provost and president coming in who is supportive of these things. So that it's been will continue to be an ongoing process to establish, even though, I don't know that I agree that his office doesn't exist. There's a good budget, and
There's a very,
some support there, but that there is something there.
Absolutely,
when some of
not
these
just
transitions
informal titles and informal duties.
Right.
That's wonderful, thank you.
and I should say, the first thing, when I mentioned that I was transitioning out, he said, 2 years, can't you make it 2 months?
Wow.
That's not true.
Please.
Brian and I spoke about this briefly during the break. The next turn of the gear, I would think, is partnerships with multinational corporations in the region, if you will. And I would think that would probably happen in the next 2 years for that sustainability piece that you're speaking of right now. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely, and I think that's crucial. I reached out as a faculty member to our Maria Coons. She's
Workforce development.
Yeah, workforce development, et cetera, to explore opportunities for internships with multinational corporations. And those exist already in manufacturing and various other areas on campus. My particular challenge is I'm not as familiar as I ought to be with those particular areas. So I've relied heavily, obviously, on Brian's expertise in that area. But indeed, that is crucial, is making sure that you have those opportunities. And it speaks to your question too, or your observation about the community and legislators in the state. That's our added value as an institution.
It's also a business case.
Absolutely, exactly,
Yeah,
right. That's key. Yeah, and Professor Khalil's way smarter than I am. She'll figure all of this out. But, this is, when you sort of make this up as you go along, which is this has been an organic evolution of this process. And that's why that was sort of an idiosyncratic approach to this narrative, but it's how I understand what has happened, what's brought us to here. That's going to be different for different people, and the beauty of transition, of changing leadership and making it, as Brian said, sustainable, is that there's going to be this renewal of passion and enthusiasm, and there may be new opportunities to take advantage of. I've been focused on faculty development. I think that's great. That's gotten us here, but obviously there's a lot more work to do in a variety of different areas.
We've been pretty intentional about making sure that we're involving all of our divisions, all of our faculty. So we have our nursing faculty who are coming more and more on board with some, trying to get some of their courses and some of their opportunities abroad. And if we can build on a field experience for some of our nursing students, that would be, another way to tie it to some of these career programs and some of our business programs a little bit more.
You had your hand up. And
that was actually exactly what I was going to ask, was there representation from multidisciplines? Because when you're talking about institutionalizing the approach, that's sort of representative of, all across the board disciplines, and some disciplines are probably easier to integrate global awareness and competency than perhaps others. And do the faculty come specifically from a few disciplines, or has there been interest or push or desire to incorporate? That seems like it was answered, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's been a deliberate approach on our part. I don't know, maybe Professor Khalil could speak to this a little bit, but one of our goals has been to move sort of curricularly away from liberal arts, which is traditionally the easiest sort of area to say, oh yeah, send them overseas, go to Ireland, go to this place. And to move into the sciences, the social sciences. Social sciences were fairly straightforward and easy. We had faculty interested and compelled to, and then sciences has been I think, equally receptive. We've had a very strong program to Costa Rica biology course. But really, those career areas are where we need to move into, and we are moving in, I think, with some degree of success. Nursing has just proposed that their final semester students who have to complete a practicum could achieve some partial credit for doing a 2.5-week, 3-week practicum in Guatemala, where they would be doing cultural nursing practices. So this partial, it's not a full practicum, but they can achieve some of those objectives that way. And then Human Services has been very much involved in our programs as well in terms of faculty development. And then more recently, we've had radiography, express interest in doing a sort of a global health component to their area as well. So I think that's certainly our goal. It's just, as you know, there are challenges in reaching out to those areas and numbers of credits and all sorts of things, yeah.
I also think part of the way that we've been able to reach out to faculty in various disciplines is partially because of the shared governance structure, and the committee has faculty at large positions, so that pulls faculty from several different disciplines to serve on the committee. And then with the global region of focus, again, as Rich had mentioned in the talk, the incentive is for faculty is that it works towards promotion, and that part of the trip was subsidized for faculty members. So that also helped to bring faculty from several disciplines because of that kind of perk, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
And faculty have to apply for the global region of focus, and so there's a small group of us then that as we review it, we have a criteria list that we look for, and we look for diversity of departments and disciplines represented across campus, and I think the global region of focus helps, but we've also been moving a little bit more. This is kind of an evolution of our study abroad, especially from kind of whatever, people wanted to do, and they were really strong programs to, look, we're going to be a little more focused and have this global region of focus and really prioritize and emphasize trips that go to this region. And now we saw with your trip and some others, we're starting to talk about, can some of these be turned into service learning trips that are part of other programs and so there's just kind of this, gradual evolution of how these are developing, and it's exciting to see.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a quick follow-up,
Yeah.
and then the faculty representatives, are they specifically drawn from full-time, or are there also adjunct faculty involved?
Representatives for,
The trip.
for the faculty development, they're all full-time.
Okay.
We've talked about incorporating, or perhaps at some point in the future, including administrators, because I think that also is important. We've not had the adjunct faculty conversation yet. I think that might be a little bit of a tough sell for a number of reasons.
Sure.
As contingent labor, it's tough. You're going to invest all this money when someone may not be, I don't know, a lot of challenges.
The challenge we ran into with adjunct faculty was the ACA.
Yes,
Okay.
us too.
And that's because we had actually gone through the whole planning process, and then when we hit HR, it was
Right.
like, oh,
Okay.
when you're directing a study abroad program or field study, you're on basically 24/7. So you've basically exceeded your weekly hours on the first day,
Would you have that same problem if we were connected to a class? Because if they would be compensated for the class rather than the trip, that
It
doesn't
is,
work?
because ACA is the number of hours per week. So like our adjunct.
Hours of compensated per week? So if they're being paid for the class and it's part of I don't know, I'm just trying to help work.
We were hoping you figured it out.
Yeah, we do need some creative solutions.
I don't know if that'll work, because we've had some adjunct go on study abroad, but I think it was prior to some of the ACA stuff.
It was prior to the ACA, and it was prior to our sort of consolidation.
Yeah,
of the,
so it could be, it might be a
Yeah.
problem that you can't overcome, but.
Yes, it's important.
One other thing I would mention that Professor Khalil said, having an institutionalized committee, advisory board, or something that is within the shared governance system has been very, very helpful to us as well. I perhaps didn't stress that enough, but it is an adjunct to the office. It doesn't have any budgetary oversight or anything like that, but it has been it's been the engine, if you will, of many of our initiatives. So things might come out of the Office of International Education, but really the folks implementing it, carrying out the creative vision behind the execution of these ideas has been members of the Shared Governance Committee. So that's been very key indeed.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Chicagoland, right? It's very diverse. Have you ever thought about embedding students in the different communities in Chicago, or even bringing in people from those communities to come to campus to talk to students?
Absolutely. And my very sad and pathetic answer is that I have never had the knowledge or opportunity to really look at that. Recently, and it would take a tremendous amount of research, and we have service learning champions on campus who do bring students to a variety of different neighborhoods across the Chicagoland area. In terms of our particular program, we've not done that. I have started to work with a local nonprofit, Otis Fresh Farms on the south side, and brought students on several occasions to work in one of their community gardens. There are tremendous opportunities available there, yes. Has anyone else had experience with those sorts of?
I mean, if you read the literature, it's always advised, but as you know, is it easy to implement? It's not.
Right.
You know, well, it's a possibility. You're not going to have that in a small city or a small town, but you have that in Chicago.
Yeah.
That opportunity.
Yeah. There's a wonderful Center for, I think it's Community Studies or something like that, run by a sociologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Randy Stoker, who's published a number of books about service learning, both domestically and internationally. And he talks about how it is a complement. I mean, that they do essentially push the same objectives. And so we tout a sort of global perspective, but really a multicultural perspective, intercultural perspective can be achieved both domestically and internationally.
Yeah, we had a sit down last year with ambassadors and cultural attaches from Eastern European countries, and they talked about their churches, you know, huge churches, talked about the events, and they expressed an interest to come on campus to talk about, you know, things about their community. We haven't, you know, invited them or taken advantage, but it's there.
It's there, absolutely, sure, yeah.
Dr. Johnson, you mentioned the service learning. I just want to say that GSU actually has started a couple of years ago. We now have a coordinator of study abroad, which is a godsend in terms of institutional structure. She's housed in the Office of International Service, but OIS, like the traditional OIS office, also is responsible for recruitment, processing I-20, J, visa, and a lot of regulatory responsibilities, and also advising international students. But this position really helped us tremendously in our logistics of managing those trips. We're still doing all the trips by faculty led, but she's the one who promoted to students, also took care of the visa application. I mean, those logistics, healthcare, insurance, and those management tasks. But we also started 2 years ago through that office a health brigade program. Wow. We did a 2-week service learning project in Guatemala, and they've been there every year. Wow. Usually those are during breaks, winter break, spring break. I think there's a consortium that manages that, so they would help them arrange, orphanage or the clinic. So there were most of the participants are students in our College of Health and Human Services, like social work, nursing, but it's also open to other colleges. So that may be something. I don't know if you have a healthcare programs, that may be a good
an opportunity. Sure.
I'll find more information.
Okay,
about
cool,
that.
great, thank you. Yeah. So I'm not sure we answered the question entirely. Where does International live at our various campuses? I mean, how many? Yeah, exactly. It's always one person, right? Typically, yeah.
As of last Friday,
Founder.
yeah,
As
it's
of
brand new, so,
Half a person, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, and so how do you overcome that challenge, that obstacle, which is that in my case, I felt it was becoming too closely associated with me. People would see emails from me, and it would be very easy to delete the emails, or they'd see me walking down the hall, and their door suddenly became jammed. So and new blood, enthusiasm, different visions, I think, are important. But how? I mean, as I mentioned to you, I get half reassigned time. No person in his or her right mind is going to do what I've been doing for half reassigned time. And that isn't to say that, my efforts have been Herculean and superhuman or this, that, and the other, but it is time consuming. I've kept, over the last 6 years, I've kept copies of my calendar, and just the face-to-face meetings per week over the course of the last 5 years has averaged 8 hours. 8 hours of face-to-face meeting average per week. Now, that includes the shared governance committee meeting and my one-on-ones, on a periodic basis with my direct report, but also study abroad students, faculty are interested, touching base with people at other institutions or these sorts of things. And that's a tremendous amount of time. And yes, I get half reassigned time, but I'm also still responsible for the 2 courses that I teach, the 50, 60 students that I have in any given semester, and I have to make sure that even though this is where my passion, my commitment, my enthusiasm and energy is devoted, that I still have a professional responsibility, and I do have passion for those students as well, to bring them along in their course of study. How do we maintain the passion, vision, commitment of champions and prevent them from burning out?
Our university had a global affairs committee that Olu and I both are member, which is broad, represented Office of International Service. It's a committee that's under the provost.
Right.
But depending on who's on the committee, and there's really not a very consistent focus. For a few years, we focused mostly on international student recruitment. Then, we also report what we are doing, in our various programs of colleges on internationalization. And College of Business was actually the first college that actually pushed, this really implemented internationalization several years ago. And we were the only college that had annual regular study abroad. But now, I think the time has changed and more colleges are doing that. Education has trips, health, human services has trips, arts and science, even though we will open our trips to those students in other colleges, and we usually have about half of the participants are students from our college. But now we have, with the coordinator of study abroad, really helped that, awareness. And we have also, partly because of our student population change, have younger, more traditional students, more and more traditional students, like people who fresh from high school or directly from high school to go to community college and then come to us. They are less, they are more interested in those and more flexible. Yeah. So we all of a sudden found ourselves competing with, several trips that are going to the same location. Yeah. This year we were originally planning to go to China because we haven't been back to China in 6 years. Then we found out from the coordinator that there are 3 trips to China planned in May and June of next year. So instead of, not stretch out too thin because we only have that many students that may be interested and available, we decided to go to, Vietnam. So there needs to be more coordination, and some kind of a campus-wide committee might be a good way to do that. I don't know, do you have an advisory group or something that work with you?
We have the Shared Governance Committee. There is a subgroup of that reviews the study abroad proposals. Okay. In our case, it's a far smaller population, and we're able to sort of coordinate. But this year, for example, we did face where we had 3 proposals wanting to go to London in the summer, and we had to sort of exercised some degree of discretion and eliminated one, and then spoke to the others to make sure they're not competing for the same body,
Right.
groups of students, same demographic. But it also, the more philosophical question I think that we faced too was, London is not in the geographic region of focus, and so do we want to, discourage that, or, and we sort of landed on the fence, really, in that instance. Yes?
So we have a large study abroad presence at COD, but it's housed under the Department of Field and Experiential Studies because it's considered obviously an experiential study. And so that department, takes you through the proposal process, the associate dean or dean, is involved in that. Those are programs that are developed by faculty, but that office sort of oversees and can say, we've got 2 other programs to China. Or they also do the marketing, and they kind of help you, talk you through the whole budget process, et cetera, et cetera. I think you can probably speak to that very well. And I think it's an interesting structure because study abroad is experiential. And so because it's part of that bigger structure, it gets, I think, more support.
Right. And that model is interesting, and I remember when we were first sort of investigating what we would do, we went down to COD and talked to a number of people. How about other institutions? I mean, that's not directly an international education office because it also includes domestic experiential courses too.
The canoe trips in the forest preserves or the arts of Chicago.
I guess just to add to what Dean Zhao said, we have a professional office, and then we have a faculty-driven committee. So I think that might be the model. Some professional, coordinating body. Then the faculty committee could, as includes representatives from the professional, Office of International Students, so they can tell us what they're doing. And the faculty-driven committee, the Global Studies Committee, has the support of upper administration. So if you ask me which has been the more effective of the two, the Global Studies Committee, the faculty-led committee, has not been very effective.
That's too bad.
Right, so I mean, that's a challenge that if you want to go that route, you got to figure out a way to mobilize faculty, and keep them interested.
Can you point to any one particular sort of reason that the faculty committee is not as effective? Is it incentive, obstacles?
I don't know, but what I know is that, sort of when I think about it at times, our college has been extremely effective. So maybe it needs a college to champion this, and then other colleges will see what's going on. Then the faculty might get more interested and become more active, so.
It is a challenge, please.
So when talking about shared governance and faculty committees, at Wabanzi, we recently restructured what we call our FDLET, our Faculty Development and Learning Excellence team. There's so many acronyms.
Exactly.
And we were very, one of the decisions we made was to make a concerted effort to have representatives from multiple disciplines, including adjunct faculty. And we sort of structured it in 2-year staggered terms to try to keep that passion, to keep the burnout, to keep new ideas coming in, and also have multiple different ideas. And from that body, as you were talking about, that's where the information will be disseminated from in large part. So we trying to, guide that grassroots movement and investment from our faculty it is early on in the stages, but has shown positive, at least movement.
Could I ask a question about that? So how do you ensure that, as people rotate off that committee and rotate on, that there is kind of a focus in a certain direction rather than kind of being scattered under several different?
So we hope by staggering the terms, 2-year terms, we hope that the people coming out, there will be someone who has been on the committee for the last year and knows the direction, and the people coming on can sort of keep that flow going. So it's not like there's this, there won't be a massive changeover at any one time. So that's the hope, at least. We'll get back to you in a couple years of how it works.
If we could shift, we can always come back to these topics, but if we could shift to strategic planning. I came to the conclusion that it was an essential part of our express vision, of our to express, a means by which we could express our vision. Has anyone else had experience with strategic planning or, I mean, specifically in terms of global education?
For us, well, of course, we're involved in a strategic plan for our college,
Right.
and we monitor them, update them, and that's part of the university strategic plan. We're in the middle of wrapping up our Vision 2020 and move on to Strategy 2025.
Right.
I don't think we have a specific global, goal, but it's under academic excellence, student success. I mean, it seems to be, it can be in almost all of the 7 goals that we, but it's not a very explicitly spelled out in those outcomes.
In our case, my thought was that it was a direct response to the lack of any mention in the mission or vision, and therefore a strategic plan would be a coherent way of representing what our visions were. It's become a pretty, as you can imagine, unwieldy document. I have on my desktop a copy of not only each of the 6 outcomes themselves, but then sort of smaller sub-objectives, and then who's responsible, whether we've achieved them, et cetera. But the key to it, to my mind, was tying it back to not the mission and the vision, but the strategic directions of the college. Right. And so that it integrates back into this larger, declared, self-professed, and public expression of direction on the part of the college, and that we were tied to it. So in a way, we benefit from those coattails, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But the idea is that we're not simply an addendum to the larger mission of the college, but we're integrated into its own objective.
I think one of the advantages of a strategic plan that emerges out of a committee, whether it's advisory, shared governance, or whatever it is, and if it's revised every so often and there are tangible outcomes and it's tracked by somebody, that is something that helps the sustainability of it. Then when people are rotating in and out of positions and a larger group has agreed to the strategic plan, some set of direction is established and ongoing and continues. So I think, we haven't talked real directly about that, but that strategic plan is something that'll live beyond the 2 of us, we hope.
So after you developed that plan, right, I'm guessing that the process was you decided to create the plan because you wanted to put some direction into what you're trying to do. Did you now sell the plan to administration and as a business case? And after you did that now unlock the resources you needed to operate? Is that how it went?
So we actually, we worked through the shared governance system, through the committee, and solicited ideas, and then I kind of wordsmithed them, if you will, and came up with sub-objectives. But its goal was to sort of systematize what we hope to achieve. It had a tangential objective of firing up faculty because we could attach them to specific objectives that might coincide with their own, desires, their own objectives. And it was meant, because we tied it back to the strategic directions of the college, yes, it was meant to make that business case that we are not, as I mentioned, an adjunct to the larger mission of the college, but really integrated aspect of what the college is meant to achieve. Perhaps even to, in some way, suggest that global ought to be included in the mission if that conversation were to come back up. It has recently, and it didn't make it back in there, but nonetheless, it's certainly a fight worth fighting. And also to your last point, yes, it was meant in some way to reinforce the need for financial resources, the budget being dedicated to international studies and programs. And as Brian mentioned, we've been thinking about how to institutionalize that budget in a way that protects or ensures the sustainability of the program. So how many people have some kind of a committee, associated with global learning on your campuses that are representative of many groups across campus. Really, I mean, I know COD does, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the call went out.
I'm sorry?
Sometimes the call went out, but sometimes you have to go twist arms personally, right? So-
Yeah, exactly, yes, yeah. And I think, that's what we've certainly found, I think, and Nellie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that it tends to be the 10, 15, or 8 strong champions, the additional 7 to 10 who are sort of ideologically aligned, and really the same 25 people that do whatever it is across campus. And I think that's a shame. I think that we have to punch through that. We have to get through that. We have to make not only the case to the administration, but I think to our fellow faculty and a variety of others. It's one of the reasons I've been interested in including administrators in the faculty development programs as well, because I think then they're able to articulate the value proposition to the provost and to their administrative superiors, if you will. I should say, Brian, and I think you'd concur, we've had strong support from the provost and the president.
Oh, yeah.
And so faculty like to rely on bashing the administration. If the administration would only let us do this, or if this, that, and the other thing. And I think in this instance, in our case, that has not been our obstacle. Yeah, the administration has not been our obstacle. And so really we have no one to blame but ourselves. I feel as though perhaps these initiatives being associated with me for so long has diminished my capacity to be effective, which is part of the reason I think of the transition, and that's important, yeah.
So when you're talking about having the same people involved with the initiatives over and over, the intrinsic motivators for this program are pretty self-evident,
Right.
but when you want to get other people involved, I think you touched briefly on the extrinsic motivators being promotional.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you rely on for those people who need that extra incentive, or were there other ideas thrown around, or was it strictly
to recognize, or,
So, Brian, I don't know if you have a response to that. I mean, really, in our case, it was, with the faculty argument was, people really weren't on the fence. There were only, really, this past time, one person whom I had to sort of tip over. And in that case, it wasn't even the promotion argument that swayed that particular faculty person. I think it was really just an idea of its value. She represents one of the career programs and of what added value it represented to her students. So she was being very conscientious about her responsibility to infuse a course. Where would it fit? How would she do that? She was also given her credentials an adjunct in history, and she and I both talked about how we really didn't want her to create a curriculum infusion program for the history course where she was an adjunct instructor, but really her main full-time employment area, which was, in this case, radiography and sonography. And so for her, it was more about trying to figure out what was going to be her project. But in other cases, yeah, I think that it does help to be able to include it on promotion documents. We've not formally worked with the Senate to have it, our faculty senate and the provost, to really have it recognized as international vision capacity as part of the hiring process, but I think that would be the next step, would be to really look at new hires with a global vision as as one of the criteria of hiring.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit to that, I think the incentive is that kind of promotion renewal process that we have. Our administration recognizes those trips, that experience, as valuable to the growth of a faculty member. We've had discussions about it at Dean's Council when we're looking at faculty. It's maybe using these global learning outcomes. Rich, I think he undersells that. That is a big thing that I use when I talk to my provost and the president, and we try to present, and we've been pretty successful so far once a year in front of our board of trustees, and we lay all this out for them, so it's very transparent. But these global learning outcomes are key, and it's easy for me to sell this trip now. We've allocated money to this program. That's what it is. That's what he gets. Every so often he asks for a few dollars more, but that's what he gets. So there's no new money. We've got it there, and students are going to benefit, you know, I think there's a difference between making a business argument and a value argument. And, you know, because we don't make money, we don't lose a lot. You know, it costs us money more than anything, but, you know, the value argument is there are these global learning outcomes. Students are being assessed on these global learning outcomes, and you heard the numbers from Rich, the number of courses and faculty members who are starting to include these things in their course. So that, you know, when I go back to that intentionality, accessibility, and sustainability, you know, that accessibility, you know, student mobility for a lot of our students is limited. They can't afford to go across. They don't have the resources, whether it's familial or otherwise. So to make an argument that our programming is bringing internationalization through the curriculum to all of these students is really an easy argument for me to make. Sometimes it is a little bit more challenging to make that argument to the faculty, but I think recognizing the benefit for those promotion processes are good. And, you know, I think faculty are motivated by that. Faculty are motivated by, I shouldn't say that. That's helpful for them, but I think they're motivated by having an internationalized curriculum, and, you know, whether they can go on these trips or not, that, you know, they want their students to have that perspective, and they always want to do what's best for their students, and they know this is what's best for their students, so they're motivated by that. I think another incentive is that this is a subsidized trip. You know, the college has been willing to allocate the resources for it. So it is a subsidized trip, and sometimes I'm surprised we don't have more faculty clamoring to go on it, but it's a lot of work too. You know, the faculty have to participate in that course. They have to have a project, and Rich is really good. If you're going to do something like this, I don't know what stages you are at starting, you need somebody like Rich to do it, because he holds his colleagues, which is not always easy to do, but he holds his colleagues accountable for some of these things. So I sometimes have an easier time now selling it to, you know, to my constituents and what the incentive is than sometimes Rich does, I think.
I think from a faculty perspective, you know, I would say that I think there's a lot of faculty on campus who do really value international education, but the big question is, how do you do it in the class? And so I think Rich has provided a vehicle by which faculty can learn how to do it, which I think, you know, might have been a stumbling block beforehand.
And my favorite part of this whole global region of focus is that, so we've got a group of faculty that have gone who were required to do this project, infuse and assess something in their class. Then those faculty have reached out to other faculty. So we have faculty who have not gone on any of these trips, maybe, I don't know if this is true or not, but theoretically never even traveled abroad, who are infusing global learning outcomes in their classes for their students, because there is this ripple effect. And I think that's the real strength of having faculty development at the center of this. Now, we have a really great model, and I think you can do that domestically through, you know, other experts and through using a large city like Chicago and the resources it has. We're fortunate to do what we have, but I think for me, what I really like about our model is that faculty development at the center and how it's reaching out to more and more faculty and students.
So I have a question about that. You know, I don't know what proportion of your students are in apprenticeship programs, you know, like workforce, you know. But one of the reasons why we have global in our mission, because we're a College of Business, right? It is Chicago. It's a major international business hub. It's a major global supply chain center. Now, your faculty in your apprenticeship programs, to what extent are they also involved in this process? And they're like making, even if you're going to be a machinist or a welder, you know, understand, you know, the global issues, because it will help them in the workplace.
Well, and I think that's an area we have not been able to break into. And I think we're now moving into the nursing and healthcare areas. And then I think our next goal, and this may be Professor Khalil and not I, but the next goal would be to move into, you know, those, what used to be called sort of vocational programs, right? Those manufacturing and those sorts of things. And I think there's huge opportunity. And if, this is a plug for a full-time person, right? If I were full-time, if this were my sole duty, then I would be derelict in that duty if I hadn't reached out to those people. Being part-time, being half reassigned time, I have not, and that's to my great shame, but that is solely the sole reason. I mean, it's really just, you begin with what you know and move outward, and in my experience, that's been what I have least known. But you're absolutely right, that is huge, and my very feeble effort was to talk to the woman who ran the Harper College for Business and to figure out internships at the business level, and it didn't go anywhere.
Well, this is also one of those places too where, I mean, this is the choir here, so we all know what the importance of international education is. We know that it's a global society, and you could probably speak much more to the business globalization than I can. But some of our challenges, I think, is with some of these apprenticeships. That's where you need to make the business argument, and sometimes if those partners don't understand that importance, and it'd be shocking to believe that they don't, but lots of times these apprenticeship programs, they want to get these students in, they want to get them through the programs, they want to put them to work right away, and I don't know that they always see that global, I would say it's a business proposition. I don't know that they always see that, so sometimes they just want to get these students through. Not that they're not good programs, not that they're valuable, we have a really good apprenticeship program and it's strong, but I think that would be the challenge that any of us would have to argue for that international experience, that student mobility experience as part of those programs. And maybe they're just waiting for us to bring it up. But I would think if it's something that they were interested in, they would have brought it to our attention too. So
I think at the community college level, it's also a place where I think deans can be essential in terms of that outreach. Our dean, Mary Beth Ottinger, for career, or what's the
career and technical programs. Yeah,
she has visited. Zurich Insurance is very close to us, and they have a lot of internships that run there, and it's a very impressive operation. I think if we were to leverage those contacts, then we might be able to. I mean, it's not manufacturing, but nonetheless, it would still be it's a multinational.
This is sometimes where we stumble over each other in our structures because our dean for career and technical programs and our apprenticeship programs report to different executive leadership positions. So we have a dean who's really interested, but our workforce development controls some of the apprenticeships, even though the programs that they're operating are under our academic dean. So that's something we're hoping our next president and provost will fix.
I would also add, business is sexy and glamorous, and we all think big dollars and our students are, but we have a bunch of nonprofit organizations around. So we have, for example, World Relief, which helps immigrants coming in, and we've got I think the Hamdard Center, which is so, I mean there's a lot of people who are going to go into social work are going to need those kinds of connections too, and so I think we forget. And I know too, we're talking about international education, only a study abroad, it seems, and I feel like international education starts at home. I feel like my students should be able to walk through the doors of College of DuPage and walk out. I want them to study abroad, but if they never study abroad, I feel like they should realize there's a global world, and that we have modeled it not just from faculty in our programs, but that registration has flags or maps up or information pamphlets, or that Campus Central has. I mean, I feel like I love study abroad, I'm all for it, but I wonder if that's the only way, because there are students who are never going to be able to travel abroad anyway. So how can we, as an entire campus, be part of an international initiative?
Faculty development, global learning outcomes. I mean, that's the key. The global learning outcomes are not at all only directed at study abroad, although that's the easiest place to incorporate them.
Right,
But
and
absolutely. No, I couldn't. Your passion and conviction is wonderful. Thank you.
I appreciate your office is the Office of International Education, not the study abroad. So you can be studying international curriculum and programs. So I really like that, and I was trying to steal that. Sorry, not jumping in front. I think it's a direct, practical application of your question. So at Heartland, we have international programs, which is a program, not an office, with one guy in a corner office. I work for him. So I get one course release.
One course release.
One course release to work
And
for
what's
this.
your load? I'm sorry.
5.5.
Okay, so one course release, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
20%.
See how lucky you are?
I know.
But he reports to, he's in the student life division,
Right.
who reports to the dean of student success.
So it's very
And so we are this
different
little
structure.
offshoot completely thing, and so as you were talking about, you just created this office that was extra organizational chart. I was like, oh, that's awesome. And you've got your assistant provost here who had to give permission for that, I assume.
We're working on it.
You know, act first, ask for forgiveness
right,
later.
that's
That's my policy.
But I really was paying attention to, it's the very valid, important rhetorical move to show that the college is giving this some heft. And how did you do that? Did you literally just wake up one day and say, I am now in the Office of International Ed?
Almost. What happened was, to be honest, what happened, my business cards used to say Coordinator International Studies and Programs, and I go to conferences, 4, 5, 6 conferences a year, some international, some national, and when I would pass it around, people would say, oh, well, you're the coordinator, can you schedule me to talk to your boss? They thought I was literally a coordinator, and so the terms didn't mean anything. International Studies and Programs doesn't mean anything in a sort of strict academic sense. So I started to look at a variety of different models, and the Center for Global Studies has always been a passion of mine, and so I came up with Office of International Education for the very reason you mentioned. I do not, it can't only be study abroad. I think we think too often about that. Some of our consortia and various other organizations really, while they ostensibly are about larger global ed initiatives, really they're just study abroad vehicles. Study abroad is wonderful, but it is really, it's about making sure that all of our students have access to a globalized curriculum that prepares them to work in an increasingly diverse workforce. And then director, I just made up. I think technically in Illinois, or organizationally, I can't be a director.
Yeah.
But
It's a crazy, but officially HR thing, you know, the title, it has a different, I know. But we're going with it,
You're not saying no, that's the important part.
That's right, that's right.
I think the ability to actually share experiences, as you said, faculty sharing their experiences are extremely important. Even students. I had a student, and I always talk to the students about applying for Disney internships, and one of my students actually applied, and sure enough, she got the internship, and I flew down. I have a little place there, so I met with the director, and he took me on a tour, and she had the experience, and she came back to the school, and she shared that with other students, and they're saying, wow, that's a possibility, we can do that. And if anyone's ever been to Orlando and actually been there, that student experienced a learning environment with students from all over the world. The classroom was just exceptional because there were screens all in the rooms, and there were desks, and the students were able to sit together. So it was truly an immersed learning experience. And I kind of share it with some of you. I also live in Alaska, so flying back and forth, the University of Alaska Southeast, of course, wants me to share in some experiences of planning. But they've offered, in all honesty, if I decide to do some of these things, that they would coordinate free trips to the rainforest, a free trip to Mendenhall Glacier, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. So these universities are willing to do that. It's just actually having that contact person and living there. You know, it's a lot easier for me because some of these universities, especially there, during the summer months, there's nothing going on. It's actually empty. They have summer school, but it's so limited. So the housing is actually available to anyone that wants to experience, especially that location. And you have a lot of university students that actually fly to Juneau to work for the summer because they do provide housing. I want to share with all of you also the cruise ship industry with hospitality and culinary. These students actually work on the cruise ships from April to September, and then they spend their time in New York in high-end restaurants. So there are a lot of opportunities. I think it's important that we share those. So the cruise ship industry, the airlines industry, they're open, especially Alaskan Airlines, they're open to these experiences. But when you have one person,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
then,
Yeah,
you know, with other responsibilities. But again, just sharing that, I think is very important as well.
Well, and I think, again, that speaks to the idea of cross-disciplinary, cross-silo partnerships, right? That many of our institutions have very strong, you know, culinary, hospitality, tourism, recreation sort of areas and divisions. And using those, either those deans or those program coordinators as champions to advance this agenda, I think is key.
I have a question for you, Rich. I can see why study abroad is so popular. It's easier to operationalize. Now, you know, internships might be a little bit harder to get, but if you involve the deans, you know, that becomes a possibility.
Yeah.
Now, can you know, I'd like you to, you know, from your own experience, can you give us a step-by-step process that can be used to internationalize the entire curriculum? You know, blow by blow.
Yeah.
How will we go about doing that?
So excellent
I'm
question.
sure it's not going to be easy at all.
I think that there are a variety of different paths to that end. What I would share with you is that it's sort of, in my mind, a two-pronged approach. So on the one side, you have to build capacity. I mean, if you do not have the faculty who are capable of teaching a globalized curriculum, then what's the point of creating or who's going to create the globalized curriculum? It's not as though it can be purchased or outsourced or brought in from somewhere else. It's got to be, to some extent, organic. So I think faculty development, capacity building is certainly one area. The other path, the other sort of co-equal column in that effort, to my mind, is what we did, which is to come up with global learning outcomes. So that when you're talking about globalizing the curriculum, you're not just throwing people into the deep end. Say, globalize your curriculum, what's wrong with you? Why can't you globalize your curriculum? Mathematics? Sure, everybody counts, right? I mean, there are all these simplistic sort of attitudes about it, and we don't really know what it means. And in different disciplines, it's going to mean different things. There are different theoretical underpinnings. There are sort of philosophical approaches. There are all sorts of matrices involved. And so we can't presume to dictate what that curriculum development process will look like. But you do have to have faculty who are willing and capable and able to take it on. And you also have to have something that they can measure it against. And that's where the global learning outcomes come into play. And at some point today, I'll try to sort of project them up onto the board. I think I have one of our handouts. They are, like our Gen Ed outcomes, they are very expansive. I think, now I'm embarrass myself and not be able to recite them, but they are.
Yeah, we have one on evaluating issues of sustainable
Ability.
development and social justice. I think a lot of our science classes can reach
Can
that
tie
one.
to that, right.
There's interconnectedness of world systems. We have the intercultural communication,
So world languages and, yeah.
evaluating or critically analyzing diverse perspectives,
Perspectives, right.
and then articulating global perspectives.
How did you pull that off? It seems to me like, you know, you cannot do that without, you know, the strong support of the president, the provost, and the deans, if you're trying to across the curriculum. So how did you, in your little, you know, undefined space that you now call director?
Which is becoming
Are
more
you
and more
able to do that?
defined, isn't it? We have a budget, we have an office, we have a title.
More than one person.
So what I did was I employed the Shared Governance Committee, and we created a work group. It was the curriculum work group, and recruited members, and literally for an entire year, 10 of us brought different global learning outcomes to the table. And we had difficult discussions about why we might value one over another, or what might be of greater utility, and what our our own values were disciplinary. I mean, this was an interdisciplinary group of faculty who brought these to the table. And I must admit, when we finally narrowed them down to 5, and we collapsed some that we'd found elsewhere, American ACE is a very strong, their internationalization laboratory has a lot of good resources. NAFSA has great resources, AAC&C, AACC, AAC&U, all of these have great global resources. And we didn't reinvent the wheel. We looked what was out there, and then we shaped it, formed it to our curriculum, what we believe to be our curriculum. And we had representatives from across all of our divisions. We narrowed it down to that. It took a year. And we were not necessarily all in consensus about every single one, but we did agree that the initial verbs followed Bloom's taxonomy, and they were indeed, this was the key to us, that they were measurable, that you could imagine an instrument that could assess whether a student had achieved that goal. I think now, my personal feeling is that some of them I'd like to kind of boost up Bloom's taxonomy. They might be recognized. All right, well, maybe we're past recognition. Let's move up to analyze, or those sorts of things. But that's Professor Khalil's job. But that was it was a long, arduous process that involved listening to a lot of different voices and kind of pulling together what we thought in the end made the most sense.
And quick follow-up. I think the point was the wind was in your sails in terms of having the support of the president and the provost all along. I think that's what I'm hearing here.
Absolutely.
As you were in the development stage of this. You weren't sailing against the wind, if you will.
Absolutely, sure. And if you are, I think then you need to reach out to your faculty champions to ground it in the curriculum, which ultimately has the objective of graduating globally competent or...
I was just going to ask, do you have a college learning outcome around?
We do. So
are the faculty able to map then to your courses and your global learning outcomes at the course level and then tie it up into the...
Yes, their ability to do so and their willingness to do so are two different things. But yes, absolutely. And we deliberately designed, I guess I should have backed up. So one of our gen ed requirements is this: examine diverse perspectives as they apply to the individual, the society, and the world. And so we were able, that was our linchpin, if you will. So our outcomes are addenda or tied to the diverse perspectives. They all fulfill that. So courses that map to that outcome should technically map to 1, 2, or more of our global learning outcomes. So absolutely, yes.
Do you have an instrument which you directly handed to the faculty? So, I mean, a basic instrument.
Well, so part of
This
the
is
faculty
Professor Khalil's our assessment guru, so I'll let her take over.
So we decided against using a common assessment because we wanted more faculty to participate in the assessment process. So what we actually did is we worked backwards and we developed rubrics for each of our 5 global learning outcomes, with the idea that no matter what the student artifact would be, whether it was a project or a written paper, that it could still be evaluated against that rubric. We are still kind of in the initial phases of the actual assessment, though, so we might have some hiccups along the way, and we might have to develop a standardized assessment. But we wanted faculty to be able to make these global learning outcomes, again, kind of relevant to the courses that they taught, right? So a chemistry professor and a history professor shouldn't necessarily have to use the same assessment instrument because it might not be relevant to what they want their students to achieve in their class.
So do you have an assurance of learning committee that does, do you have an assurance of learning committee that does all that at the college or how do you decide which course to assess, what artifacts to use, how do you test and all that?
We did a course mapping. We had a course mapping project. So we sent a email and we spoke with all the coordinators and faculty department chairs, and we gave them a course mapping document where they determined to what degree the different courses met each of our global learning outcomes. So we use that kind of as our basis to figure out which courses were meeting which outcomes. At the moment, our participation in the assessment is voluntary, so we have asked faculty, right now we're assessing one of our global learning outcomes, and so we've asked faculty to give us their student artifacts, and we will be using the rubrics against.
Student artifacts from courses that mapped to this one outcome. So we have, both Professor Khalil and I have benefited from being involved with a college-wide institutional shared governance committee focusing on learning assessment. It's had various names at different times. And basically, it's the learning assessment, institutional learning assessment, Gen Ed learning assessment, shared governance committee. It has representation from all across campus, from administration, faculty, et cetera. And we have mimicked many of their processes because they are effective at the institutional level of, you know, whether it's course mapping to the Gen Ed requirements or actual institutionalized. And it's a very systematic process that we assess each of the 5 learning outcomes, one in any given year. We follow up with an improvement plan, and then an assessment of the improvement plan, and then by 4.5, 5 years later, we're reassessing that. And so we're building a body of data. We are mimicking our efforts, I think quite deliberately and consciously, after what the Institutional Learning Assessment Committee has done. And the lessons, I think, have been very valuable.
AACU has a global rubric.
Yes.
Did you see that it was difficult to adopt to a community college setting?
Yeah, so we actually, I think we started with the AAC&U Global Values Rubric and decided that their column number 5 was way above the level of what we would expect of community college students. So we used portions of that, but modified it for our particular institution and what actually works for our institution and our college.
So would you be interested in sort of thinking through of a validation of an instrument, maybe?
Yeah, so
that would be community college oriented, that we could sort of give it away, and that would get a lot of faculty buy-in very quickly. If there is an instrument that's validated, that's community college centric, science oriented, because I teach science, so maybe a little more science oriented. Because global learning is very common in the social sciences, but I think having it in the health professionals would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's also my question is like, does every program have to have some kind of assessment related to GLO? You brought up the math, how do they, that is one program that I would struggle with, how do they help students develop? I mean, those could be probably done in the Gen Ed, like, liberal arts, humanities level, but so how do you manage that?
Well, the idea would be that students, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Students wouldn't do it in every single class.
Right.
But by the time that they graduated, through the collective courses that they have taken, they will have met all 5.
Okay.
That's a good way to do it. So this is so that's where the rubber hits the road. Like if you really want to have the global learning and you want it infused throughout the curriculum, then there have to be sacrifices made in some of those classes where it doesn't seem to fit as much to say, this is what we are committed to as an institution. And we're going to get it into every class. And that becomes really challenging and difficult. And I think there's very, very few colleges and universities across the nation that do that.
And it would be very prescriptive and heavy-handed, I think, on the part of an administration or the faculty or whomever to sort of institute that. But I have projected our global learning outcomes up onto the board we provide some examples of how course-specific outcomes might be applied. I lost my train of thought. No, it's fine. But I think, this idea of outcomes is key. And we've found it to be pretty effective. We've also tied it, as I said, back to the study abroad question. We do require that our study abroad courses definitely have at least 2, if not 3, of the global learning outcomes. And then we request that there be artifacts in order to demonstrate that indeed assessment is occurring and these objectives are being achieved.
I like the workaround of I'm not going to say assuming, of understanding that if a science student or a math student take all those classes, by the time they graduate, they have a globalized perspective. But how could you infuse globalization into a science degree like chemistry? How would you do that?
Well, we have a biologist, a botanist sitting at the table. What I can say is that in a chemistry class, well, maybe you should speak to it,
Yes,
right?
one of my colleagues in our chemistry department, in her courses, she is infusing sustainability topics within her chemistry class. So she actually is meeting the first outcome, the evaluate issues of sustainability. And she has plans, and I know it's a study abroad capacity, but she has plans in the future to take her students to Costa Rica to study sustainability issues there. But this semester, with her students on campus, they're working on global sustainability issues. And so, I mean, they're doing things that are local, like local composting, but then they're also going to be talking about what that means in the global context as well. So it's still, you know, she's made it specific within chemistry. They're looking at like soil chemistry characteristics, but she's able to.
Globalized?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
one
think
of,
though, I'm sorry, I think
ahead.
isn't that why you go to the discipline faculty? I mean, on our global education committee, I have a math professor who is very passionate about doing this. I wouldn't know how to do that in her field, but she does. So I think that's why you go to the faculty and say, how would you globalize your curriculum? We'll support you. But I don't think it's up to us to think of every I mean, we can certainly make suggestions, but they're the ones who are going to know.
and it's certainly possible, but absolutely you defer to the content area experts. I think our job becomes then how do we facilitate their
Correct.
opportunities to kind of create that new curriculum, because it takes time, it takes effort. It may not be intuitive, and so we have to support either with stipends, reassigned time, faculty development opportunities, workshops, all of those sorts of things. In terms of the global learning outcomes, one of the things, we haven't done this yet, but what I'd like to do would be to build a series of workshops around curriculum infusion and have it be interdisciplinary and really build faculty capacity to do this on a wider scale, and offer them through our Academy for Teaching Excellence, offer faculty incentives that would show up on their promotion and tenure documents and those sorts of things. And it would also perhaps afford them, some sort of stipendiary benefit. One way we have tried to do this, and it hasn't worked, and I think it's an interesting case study, we came up with what we cleverly called the globally infused curriculum units, which, if you say it very quickly, is GQ. And we built a class, and we were going to do it as a first-year seminar, so a first semester freshman class, built around the global commodity of sugar. And there would be 8 teachers who would appear in that classroom at different times. There would be an instructor of record who would get them started and finish it up. But then we had, I think that year we had biology, chemistry, this is what made me think of it, sociology, history, anthropology, English literature, and these instructors it was focused around sugar, and so they were talking about the history of sugar, the chemical composition of sugar, the horrific legacy of sugar as a plantation crop in the Caribbean and the Americas, and all of these different things. So from all of these different perspectives, it would have been an absolutely amazing class. And each of the faculty members involved were willing to simply teach it as a 0.6 extra, load course, basically for free. I mean, at that point, anyway, and it didn't run, not because we didn't have the support of the associate provost, not because we didn't have the support of the faculty, not because we didn't have support of the deans and various other stakeholders, but because the advisors, counselors, or whomever, we didn't know how to pitch it to students. Yep. And so our stumbling block was the people who see the students. And they're marvelous people, but we couldn't sell them. I wrote them a 1-page document about it. I went to talk to them, and they were not able to translate that into something that was of interest to students.
Was it transferable also,
Yes,
or was it special
good
time,
question.
so for
Yeah,
credit?
as a first-year seminar, yeah.
It was, okay, you did say that, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, but no, because I think that's key, exactly. Those are the sorts of questions you got to ask. And so then we tried it again. Well, Nellie pulled it together, and we ran into a seminar. Now it was only 3 classes that were going to be loosely linked with the theme kind of
Woven between the
woven
three.
between the 3. And we still couldn't do it. And again, and I don't know what the challenges are. I don't know, Brian, whether you have any sort of thoughts on that, but I mean, we couldn't.
You know, I think we have, so part of the process was making sure these were transferable courses, whether it was the first-year seminar course or whether it was these other courses, they're all transferable. Because that's going to help students and it's going to help advisors talk to students. But we found with these types of, anything that's new, we don't do as good a job of talking to our student service area, the people who are registering the students for it, on what the added value is. And I think we have to get better at that.
How do you get better at that, though, I guess is what, I mean,
You guys use
it
learning
the
communities?
language?
So it was, so Rich and I, yeah, so we have to get better at it by, you know, trying to get out in front of them early and try to help them understand how it fits into a student's program and how it fits into, you know, a student's degree plan. And these courses did. One of the challenges I think we had with this, one of multiple challenges was the classes were offered on 2 different days and different times. So for a student to
The
commit
second iteration was, not the first time,
Right.
but
The second iteration was kind of, you know, so the student would have had to commit to a Tuesday, Thursday, and a Monday, Wednesday at different times. So I'm encouraging them to try it again and to try to schedule the 3 classes sequentially so that the students committed from 8 to noon or whatever on Tuesday and Thursday. And then what I would love to be able to do is then the next semester run another sequence focused on global from 8 to noon on Tuesday to Thursday.
Could not,
So that gets into trouble with scheduling and everything.
Faculty.
But
Is it because?
you know, I think integrating student service personnel at the idea stage is good. You know, we find this with a lot of our programs. We have co-requisite courses that are great opportunities for students in math and English to accelerate through developmental coursework, and we have trouble getting enrollment in there, mostly because the students don't understand it, because the people they're talking to at the intake process don't quite understand it.
So do you have faculty, somebody in the, can you do advising sessions like in the summer or anything like that? No.
We go and speak with the advisors,
But you can't advise,
and, but again, then it's, I don't know.
And we're hoping for next fall to redo our orientation process where faculty are more involved. And that's one part. Well, it's aligning with the areas of interest and getting the faculty involved there, so.
Was this a class to be in place of the first-year seminar? It's just a
No.
class on.
Second iteration?
No.
Would there be a perception that it may be hard, perhaps, with multiple instructors?
Well, the feedback we received the first time is that students were freaked out that there were going to be 8 teachers.
Right.
And I said, wait, did you tell them it wasn't all 8 of us at the same time? It was one by one for 2 weeks? And so, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the second iteration, I think,
Yeah?
that one of the feedbacks we had received, because one of the classes was an English class, one was a science with lab class, and they said that they typically don't have students take their English class the first semester and their science lab class during the same semester. So
That
that,
makes sense.
And so a couple of things, I mean, you know, trying to help the people doing the registration and the advising, that those necessarily aren't decisions that, you know, if the institution is saying these are classes we're going to offer together, there's been some discussion that these are good classes to offer together. So to help with that conversation too, but also as we are putting these classes together and these opportunities together, to sit down with the student services and say, okay, how do we sell this to students, and maybe let some of our own language and things like, it's a great thing, we have 8 faculty working together who are all going to, you know, for one of the advisors to say, let's not sell it that way. Let's not even talk about that. Let's do it this way.
Right.
And maybe we're not always happy with the way that sales pitch gets made to students, but to maybe let that happen a little bit so that the students can get into it.
They're the ones who talk to students. They know what get them interested.
Right,
Like we try to sell cross-disciplinary, but they have a mindset, I'm a English major, why do I
Right.
need to take a course that
Exactly,
they're
yes.
our chemistry professor, so, yeah.
What was the title of the course?
The sweetness and power.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sweetness and power of,
Sugar, yeah, it's
yeah,
named, there's an anthropology book with this moon,
yeah.
yeah.
This has been very good, but we have 30 minutes left. So I don't know if Rich has another question that he wants to throw on the table.
So there were two more, and I'd like to bring in the insights of our colleague here who's been very patient and quiet. But this idea of partnerships and leveraging existing opportunities such as Fulbright, we have taken very good advantage of it, I think, and it's an amazing program. We've had great success with it. We have not taken as much advantage of the other direction of it, if you will. I mean, you can send U.S. scholars overseas. I fortunately have the opportunity of sitting on one of those peer review committees, and it gives me great insight into what constitutes a strong U.S. scholar application. And this is my first year, so I hope to be able to share that information with colleagues seeking to apply it. But what kinds of partnerships, whether it's overseas centers or university partnerships that you might have, do you have, and how did you create them? Did they come out of a sort of Fulbright experience? And maybe this would be a good opportunity for you to talk about the application process from your end, Jairo.
Yeah. Well, this opportunity I don't know if private universities in Costa Rica apply for this. As far as I've heard, the system is kind of different from what we have there in Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, the most important universities are public universities. So I just got this form or this offer because I work for a public university. So it sounds weird maybe for you, but if we want to be hired for a company, so they always pay attention to public students from public university. And then at the end, so private university comes. So that's why I just first got this opportunity because I work at public university. And the process was not kind of easy. And I don't like to say this because it was like a competition in Central America, mainly Nicaragua and Costa Rica. And then the form that I just filled out was kind of really and very long. It took me a whole day long, filling it with all kind of requirements, plus some letters, recommendations from different professionals there in Costa Rica, and then a medical form too, and finally with an interview in the USA Embassy. That was just, in fact, what I had to do, but it was a very long, I just started in January. As far as I know, so Harper College started last year in June, right?
Yeah.
But I started in January, and then I just realized about this opportunity that I was selected in March. And then from March to July, I think. Yeah, it was a time for me to be in a hurry because I was waiting. Yeah, I was waiting for some requirements. But then, like in the end of July and the first week of August, I was still waiting for the round trip flight tickets. And something, I don't remember the name, from the Institute of International Education. But suddenly it just came out with everything, but at the very end. I mean, the process was really long since January to March, but then from March to June or July, it was like that I had to be in a hurry, just looking for the requirements. So I know that this is like a bureaucratic system, not just here, but there in Costa Rica too. And it was kind of worried because, well, I didn't say this, but I work for the Ministry of Public Education. mainly for elementary school. I also work for a high school. That high school belongs to the university that I work for, and all of them are public institutions. So at the end of this process, I have to ask for permission for the government. I had to write a letter of permission for the whole academic year, which I didn't find any problems because I am a public, let's say, worker. I don't know.
Employee.
Yeah, employment. Yeah, employee. And so that's basically. And there was something that I just faced. It was that it was made like an economic study. I have been working for the Ministry of Public Education since 2004. That means 14 years. I got my tenure position, and before leaving my country, I had to give like a summary of what I was doing since 2004 up to now. So if I own you something, I mean, it could be $5 to the government, so that will be like an obstacle for me not to be here. And then I owe the government $60. So I had to pay it. Yeah, and it's kind of, I mean, those details that I have to deal with, but it was not kind of difficult. Yeah. But, I mean, the process was kind of really long since January to August, and to fill out with all those requirements.
What if I can just jump in quickly? So in filling out this application, reading about Harper College, what were your expectations, hopes, desires in coming to the U.S. and perhaps Harper College, but just coming to the U.S.?
Honestly, I was excited of this opportunity, and this is my first time in the States. But then I got like nervous or somehow like anxious because I didn't know what I was going to do as a Fulbright scholar, because I just sent my resume and everything that I was doing since 2004 up to now to the Institute of International Education and to Harper College and then to the USA Embassy. And then based on that, I expected to do something regarding to what I do there in Costa Rica, which is I teach English as a foreign language there. Now that I am here, I work for the ESL department. I am tutoring some students, and then doing some observations too, and to see how different or equal the educational system is here from the one that we have there in Costa Rica. But it is not just that. I mean, I'm doing everything I can do, listening to you talking about is it sweet cane? Sweet. I mean, the process of sugar?
Yeah, sugar.
Have you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It kind of, I'm interested on this because where I grew up in the Pacific Coast, there we have the most important companies that process that sweet cane to have brown sugar and the white sugar. I didn't know that you were like doing this. Now
we'll talk more.
Yeah. So I'm interested. Now I live in the Caribbean side, and there I have been for 13 years. I have been there, and there we have the Standard Fruit Company from Chiquita and those. So we have the pineapple plantation, the banana plantation. So because of those kind of background knowledge, so I have been helping some professor in some different departments. For example, I have been giving a lecture for Latin American culture history. So 2 weeks ago, I was talking about independence, Central American independence, and then because of the banana plantation, so I helped Professor Monica Edwards with the topic about food in the United States.
She's a sociology professor.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't say that. And mainly about the banana. She was telling the students about Guatemala and the chiquita bread. But now that I am here, so I'm going to help her with this topic because mainly where I live, in a neighborhood, so we have different farms from number 1 to number 11, and then in each of most of them have banana plantation from the Standard Fruit Company. So we provide, the Standard provide us with, most of the population with different type of jobs and with water, to drink, like potable or purified water. But we are facing some problems, and that's why those are some of the topics that we are going to talk about in some of her classrooms or teach classes. And then I have been working with the adult education program too, doing some observations. And so in my university, which is a public, so we try to help the community with some outreach program. And some of them, so we don't ask the population to pay for those courses. Some of them are for free. Some of them, so we just ask them to pay, but it's not like regular prices, but lower. But the purpose is just provide those people with some tools for them to have a tool to face their daily lives. Because most of them, their focus is just finishing high school and then get entered to the Standard Fruit Company. In the past, it was a great and amazing company because they were well paid, but now it is not. So our campus, which is a branch, is not the main campus, so is there because we want to help the population to have different tools for them to think about something different, not just the Standard Fruit Company. So that's basically what we do there in Costa Rica. And now what I'm facing here at Harper is kind of similar because Harper is a community college. So I am in love with this college because basically, a lot of projects that Harper has, it's mainly what we have there in Costa Rica in my university. So that's why I'm doing not just working for the ESL department, but also for different departments that if I have the time, if they just require me to be there with them, so I'll do it. Yeah.
And this is the great benefit of having a Fulbright scholar on campus, is it's not just that he or she is going to be ensconced in a particular department, but rather there's all of this sort of cultural outreach. Right. And Jairo has been marvelous. How many of you all have taken advantage of the Fulbright program? It's a really strong, there are a number of different ways to do it. The Scholar in Residence program is the one I'm most familiar with, but there's a sort of a little known opportunity called the Outreach Lectureship Fund, OLF, and you can request any scholar who is in the country to come at the expense of the host institution and Fulbright to come to your campus. So you go through the main office in, I think it's in New York or in Washington, and request a particular scholar. There's a list on the website of all the scholars in the country, in the entire country.
What's it called again?
Outreach Lecture Fund, OLF, through IIE, through the International Institute of Education. And the host institution picks up the tab and then is reimbursed by Fulbright. But it's a great opportunity.
There is something more, I'm sorry. It's not just that I'm here trying to help different faculty, but so we tried, National University of Costa Rica there, so we tried to have kind of agreement or I don't know how to call this, between Harper and partnership, yeah, and my university. So we're trying to keep that kind of contact. So we in Costa Rica, we are not going to leave this opportunity just to go away itself. So,
nor are we. We're very eager. Yes. In fact, I'll travel to Costa Rica with Jairo sometime in the new year and see if there are opportunities. And I think there are. We already send a number of programs to Costa Rica.
We went to Jim Rex's university.
we went
So
to-
one of the nice things about the Global Region of Focus is kind of how it ties together. The Fulbright scholar who visited us, the student study abroad trip in that third year was to his university and institution where they spent some time.
So we just have a few minutes to sort of wrap up, right? Or 10, 15 minutes? So I wanted to quickly turn to two other subjects. Study abroad has come up quite a bit, and I wonder if we want to share some experiences around study abroad, particularly in terms of ensuring the quality of those programs. Do you have training for faculty? What sort of risk management things do you have in place? Those sorts of things. How do you see international education abroad fitting into your larger international education agenda? Maybe not. No.
Well, one of the, I mean, we're very new. Traditionally, Wabanzi has only sent students through ISIP
Sure.
programs, and they've been doing that. But we've been working with the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at NIU, so that's been a great resource for us. In fact, for our Cambodia program, they provided us with seed money for student scholarships. They hosted our pre-departure orientation. They provided lectures. So I really see the consortial relationships and partnerships as being greatly beneficial. And the faculty who led that primarily received their training through Fulbright programs. Okay. They had gone through NIU's center for, they did Philippines for a summer, they did Vietnam?
Cambodia, right?
Cambodia.
They have a strong
And
Khmer
so
studies program.
through those programs, through those Fulbright opportunities, then they had to develop modules to infuse the curriculum at home and to share in their repository.
Yeah.
And from that, they developed this program. So it's really been experiential training. We do not have a formalized faculty training program yet.
When part of their responsibilities when they came back was to present to faculty. Right. That was amazing. Yeah. You know, that was just really, really interesting to hear their different experiences, because what I thought was interesting, there was three, and it was three different socioeconomic, points of view. You know, some of them were treated, high on the hog. The other ones were like, I was in a mud hut. So it was really...
One nearly didn't survive,
But it was just so interesting and fascinating to see that about a country that we may not know much about. So it was really fascinating for us to learn about that.
And leveraging those opportunities are really important. Absolutely,
I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to make a shameless plug.
Please.
For a Vietnam trip next year, if your students come along, we can probably subsidize them to the tune of maybe $800, possibly.
Depending on how many we have. Usually it's 600 to 700.
Right.
And through the IU Cyber Grant. When they just received a news that this week they're going to continue receiving funding for the next 4 years. Right. So this next year will be our first year under the new grant cycle. So we would like to.
And if you provide maybe like 8 students, your faculty might go on the trip for free.
Okay, there's the incentive right there. That's the incentive. The carrot, yes.
Amy will be working that.
8 students.
You gotta bring, how many?
Yeah, our coordinator of study abroad does take on a lot of those orientation for faculty and students, because that's part of her job. And she also make sure that we do the risk assessment, risk preparation, the insurance. Always we provide the list of the students and faculty participants to the police department and dean of students. So in case something happens, they know. Of course, they all have to submit a application, so we all know they're on the trip, and they're some of them take the court trip as part of a course for credit, others audit the course. So they're all officially on record. They're not just going to, Brazil for 2 weeks for vacation. So that is one way to manage it, is to officially they're doing something, that's school-sponsored.
So you mentioned auditing. One of the things, in terms of the courses, one of the things that we've sort of struggled with or thought about is this idea of cross-listing with continuing education. And the tricky part is that you're bringing different pools of students together, students who may have different motivations, different incentives. The students taking the credit-bearing course are looking at the grade and worried about these sorts of things, whereas the continuing ed might be thinking, Brazil, so how have you overcome that? How do you deal with it?
I don't think we do it with continue ed, but they audit the course.
The audit is still,
I mean, we sometimes have family members, alumni, or even advisory board members who want to go on the trip, so they don't have to take the course for credit. So they either apply as a non-degree seeking student and then audit the course for a small fee. They are still registered in the course, not a continuing education. That may be another model, but we have not been going in that direction. That will be a challenge.
And I'm sort of philosophically opposed to that.
Right, me too. I mean,
As if someone is not going for the expertise of traveling with the faculty and for the academic credit, then they should sign up for, with a travel agent or a tour, or, that's and we're running into that right now because we have 2 faculty that are using EF tours, and that whole
sliding
one
scale.
of them and one of them told a student that they could do it without taking the course, and but the instruction is so integrated. Then it's like having a non-registered person squatting in your course, So I just think that, and even in our conversations here, I think we should be very cognizant of the terminology that we use, that these are field studies or study abroad programs. I don't even use the word trip, because trip, sends the message that it is tourism, that it is a vacation versus a study or a program. So I think that's something that we should be cognizant of, too.
And I'm thinking the financial and legal responsibilities of having those people.
Right.
Where they may not follow the rules that we have for students, and then we can land into a heap of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. No, and those are all the sorts of challenges that you face. What about grants? You mentioned different sources of money. In our experience, I think the challenge of getting grants, I mean, the Fulbright Scholar Program, I could write that grant in my sleep. It's fairly straightforward. I understand it. I've sat on the review committee. I know what their expectations are, and it's limited. You look at these Title VI grants or these other, large, I mean, they're absolutely insane. How does one work with our limited resources to achieve success in grant writing? I mean, do you have grant writers on your campus? Do you outsource that? How do people handle that?
We do have a grant writer, but we just partner with those who have already secured Title VI grants.
As junior partners.
And we support them yes, exactly.
Yeah, we've done that with Northern too. Yeah. And they do all the writing. You might provide them with a 2 pages.
A letter of support, yep.
But what about larger grants? I mean, you just mentioned the grant.
Well, we are their junior, or we're their sub-grantee through IU. So, we're the same. We did try to submit a couple of capacity building grants to Department of Education, but not us, but the College of Arts and Science and the Office of International Service. We didn't receive it. So it is a challenge.
Often you can either read the critique and get a narrative from the critique of your denied grants. Did you find that there were areas
that one particular denial mostly was, well, it's kind of ironic because it's a capacity building grant, but the reason we were rejected partly was because we don't have a institution-wide global initiative. So, you know, we wanted to use that to develop it, but we were denied because we don't have systematic efforts yet.
Yeah, I'm not a grant writer. I've written a few, gotten a few, but it seems to me that one of the things that a lot of granting agents want to see is either one, some program, some strategic approach to what you're doing.
Exactly.
And or that this is seed money to develop something that you have already kind of demonstrated that you're going to be able to sustain when the grant funds are gone. So yeah, you know, we haven't really gone for the Title VI yet because we just, you know, we haven't been able to anticipate that far out yet.
Right.
We are, we're looking in that direction. We're partnering with, for next year with Joliet Junior College and College of Lake County on a sort of a 3-year Title VI. But you know, who knows what our opportunities are? But in both instances, those 2 faculty members have been successful in writing the grant. So I'm hopeful that we can just kind of tag along and learn something from the process.
Timing is good for us too because we got that award, so we're going to leverage the hell out of that. At least a year and see.
And I think, you know, speaking of the award, this is perhaps not as fair as it might be, but leveraging those kinds of recognition, I think, are key. Brian mentioned going to the Board of Trustees. We try to get in front of the Board of Trustees every year or so to be able to tout our achievements. This year we'll be able to have Jairo address the board. We'll be able to provide them with the numbers, the results of our first year of the Faculty Infusion Latin America program. I also think that it's when you are, I just decided to apply for the NAFSA award. I thought our global region of focus, and of course I did it a year before we won it, so our numbers were pretty small, but I thought that we had a concerted effort, a concerted initiative that was replicable and all of those things. And I was kind of surprised that we got the Spotlight Award, but it has proved to be quite, the president was never opposed to anything we did, but now that we got the recognition and we're going to pick up some hardware in DC, he's very excited and brings it up quite a bit. He's mentioned several times the trip he and I are taking to DC together and what bar we're going to go to and what cigars we're going to smoke and this and all of that seems right, but that's the kind of social capital, right, that you have to take advantage of. And you know, as one middle-aged white dude to another middle-aged white dude, I'm going to leverage that to the best of my ability, and on behalf of, in service of the program. And I don't mean to sort of be trite about it, but I think recognizing what you can leverage, what capital you have, and using it to your advantage, I think is key as well. And that's, again, back to the value proposition, the business argument. Recognize your audience. Rhetoric matters. What you call things matters. They're not trips, they're programs. You know, all of those sorts of things. I think we're kind of out of time.
I had one simple question.
Please.
Very simple, probably after all these complicated topics. What would be a simple way to distinguish between a field study, a study abroad, and a first-year seminar with global education? Just, if I had to take home a nutshell and say, what did you learn today? At least I want to be able to say that.
I'm not sure that there's a simple answer. I mean, COD has the experiential field studies model down. It incorporates both domestic and international. Right. So I'm not sure that there's one thing that kind of delineates them. There are different ways you could think of each. That field studies could be domestic. Education abroad is going to be international. And then perhaps you would have a service component or something like that, or a freshman, you said first-year seminar, that might incorporate any of those elements. There might be a field studies component in the first-year seminar or an education abroad component in the first-year seminar. I don't see them as co-equal. I see them as variations of opportunity. I don't know if...
I would say the same thing, although, field studies can be abroad or domestic, right? And so it's that experiential component. It's really, because they all have that experiential component is what so I would just say they're variations of the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same modality, what works for you.
And in my mind, field studies are shorter.
Yes, that's good.
You know, usually in that 7 to 10, 7 to 14 day, and then study abroad is typically longer.
This is actually a good takeaway for me, because we call our study abroad trip. And this is why we use the word trip, because when we started, we tried to get students to be interested. Right. So the word trip makes them interested. But now that we're more matured, I think we might change it to field study.
Well, it gets down to the point even of flyers. Our program assistant, the woman whose name was on the slide, Allie Olson, created a wonderful flyer for a program that Professor Khalil and I and another colleague are going to run next summer in Panama. It's 3 courses, English, geography, and biology. Students sign up for one or a combination of the 3. But the flyer had a picture of this gorgeous, beautiful, emerald green cove and a nice white sand beach. And I looked at it, said, man, that's awesome, sign me up. My colleague from geography, gorgeous. Professor Khalil looks at it and says, it screams vacation.
Yeah.
And so these mixed messages, we have to be consistent about. If we're not going to call it a trip, then don't front and center a beach shot where a kid's going to imagine sitting there drinking a pina colada. Instead, put an interactive scene or something, and you can still have the beach scene, because part of it is we want to attract students to these programs, and maybe the beach is what clinches it, but make it the smaller image. All of these are sort of strategies to be conscious of, and it's key. Rhetoric matters. How we present these trips to our colleagues, to students, to administration matters.
And do you guys draw from the community? Like, our trips are open to any community member as well?
No, these are all student.
The community is our students, but they have to be a student registered.
But so our field and experiential office has a mailing list now of community members who've taken, and it just gets broader and broader. And so you'll find, maybe not on every trip, but there's often community members are, established. We had the head of Metro on a field studies in France tasting wine, right? So, we market to the community as well. It's not just our students. These trips are open to.
So I'll answer, and then Rich can. One of the things we talk about this, and I think we're in agreement.
Strategy, yeah.
We really are trying to connect this to our, we are connecting this to our students, to our registered students, so we don't do that. And, we've had conversations about trips, and one trip this year we denied.
Program.
And I'm usually pretty good about that, but one of the programs we denied because it looked too much like a trip.
But there's an academic component. Even the community members have to write they don't care about the grade, but they do.
Right. But I think what we don't want to make any, because I think I'm very proud of what Rich has built up, and I think we've got a really strong program. I always say to Rich, I convince my provost, I said, we're not going to do anything to jeopardize what we're doing, to call into question the integrity academically as a college of anything we're doing. So that is really a lens I think both of us look through.
Yes. To your point, however, that the model that COD has been able to build and market is very strong, and you've had the support of your various presidents over it for a long time. In our case, here's just a small example. One of the first study abroad programs that I oversaw, sanctioned, was an art appreciation class, Art 115. And this was early on, before our first strategic plan or anything. We'd just literally gotten the green light from the associate provost, and we were moving forward. And went with EF Tours. It was a fairly expensive program. The seat time occurred during the 8-week. There are many, many things now that set off all kinds of alarms to me.
Okay.
They said that during the 8 days of the program, that was supposed to cover all of the seat time for the art appreciation class, all these sorts of things. And faculty, I think, thinking back, unbeknownst to me, 4 faculty had signed up as students, and since as employees we don't pay tuition, this is a huge bargain for them. And they went on the program.
Gotcha.
And while they were overseas, I became aware that there were other faculty on the program than the 2 instructors of record. We always send 2 faculty. And because a student got sick, and one of the additional faculty was a nursing faculty, and so she was able to sort of minister to the student anyway. And so I got wind of all this. Didn't breathe a word, and thought, okay, I hope nobody finds out about this. After they got back at a board meeting, two of the faculty are sitting there yucking it up with each other, talking about what a great time they had had on this trip to France with students through Harper that they didn't pay for, and the provost is standing right behind them. A provost is a very polite, regal woman, intelligent, academic, professional. Didn't say a word. After that it was different.
Yeah, I don't believe I was associate
No, you
provost.
weren't at the time. This was before we tightened up all these things. Anyways, it became very clear to me through my direct report, his predecessor, that there was no way in hell we were going to do this again. That was the wrong message. So anyways, we faced opposition to that. Since then, what I've tried to do is craft these as transfer credit-bearing courses, faculty-led, and only students. And sometimes with popular courses to Costa Rica, for example, we'll get 18 students. I try to cap it at 15 or 16, and so we don't take all the oxygen out of the air with this one particularly successful program. But what I noticed too is that sometimes alum will come back. They loved the course the first time they took it. Now they're at ISU or UIC or wherever they want to come back. They take one course at Harper and they're on these programs. We try to limit that as well because from the perspective of the present administration, it dilutes the opportunity for our students. They're taking seats that other students get. So what I've tried to do though, because I do believe that is important, is given our present climate, is to create a portfolio of continuing ed courses that we market to the community.
So it's not cross-listed.
It's not cross-listed.
And that trip the program that we denied, we suggested
that they go
talk to CE and make a great trip.
Trip and tour, exactly.
The beauty of this, however, is, and I think this is what faculty and others tend not to think of, there are revenue opportunities here. That there are ways that these monies that we're collecting from the community can be brought back and either repurposed to provide study abroad, scholarships or other opportunities to beef up our programs. And it's just a matter of creatively thinking about how we can do that sort of thing. We collect a $100 administrative fee for all of our study abroad programs. The business, and I knew this, we designed the program, I knew it. A couple, 6 months ago back in the spring, the business office guy calls me up and says, hey, you got $2,700 sitting over here in this account. I said, $2,700, how did you get a hold of our money? He said, well, we collect this administrative fee. And so now we transfer that annually into our international education budget, and I think we need to talk about this, but maybe we earmark those monies as scholarships for students.
Right.
So there are different ways of sort of manipulating these facts, and I think it really just takes an open mind, a supportive administration, and key champions.
Lunch is waiting, so I'm just going to interject as the host. Please feel free to grab lunch and we can continue, informal conversation.
Thank you very
throughout
much. This has been great.
Learning experience.
The next 15 minutes should be a synopsis of the roundtable discussion, but it was so good. When I was thinking about this, I thought I had maybe like 5-6 bullet points to share. I have almost 40.
Oh, whoa.
So I think I'm just going to get them typed out and I'm going to send them out.
That would be great.
Right. I'll just talk about some of them, and you can jump in if you want to. I'm sure Rich will not mind if you have any questions, to answer. So it's good to, I don't even know where to start. Let me start with the summary. The summary is have an open mind towards international education, seek the support of administration, and have key champions. So if you can do those three things, it looks as if that's a good path to success. Have a strategic plan. Don't focus only on study abroad. Also think about things like faculty exchange. Fulbright is a good way to do that. Administrator exchange, and think about how to infuse the entire curriculum with globalization concepts. With, that's not going to be easy, but the consensus that's a good thing to do. Faculty development is very important in trying to globalize the curriculum. It's a key issue. It's important to work with other community colleges and centers in four-year universities because they have resources that could be useful in trying to globalize curriculums. In terms of the strategic plan, it should be developed with a view of being a business case that includes a value proposition, clear goals, objectives, and can be translated into actionable items. It's important to have learning objectives, have an assurance of learning process that includes learning objectives and also at the course level. But in trying to come up with those learning objectives, faculty should be involved in deciding what they are and determining how to implement the assurance of learning process, including which courses, what artifacts, how to assess, and how to, in our college we call it completing the loop, right? So each loop starts with a pretest, and then to find the gaps, and then next is the intervention, and then implement the intervention, collect artifacts, evaluate it, see whether or not there's been learning. If there has, at least continue for some time and then close the loop and then move on. And it's important to do this also for study abroad objectives. So it's important to, well, not important, but think about the option of using special topic courses in delivering study abroad, programs, because that provides flexibility, but also, try to tie study abroad programs to catalog courses. So I guess, that also, in terms of funding, look for grants. Title VI grants could be out there. Look for grant writing expertise. And you can also try to be strategic about raising money from the community. They can also be dedicated to study abroad programs. There was also another point about being careful with the language being used. Trips, not advised. Pictures of lakes and, no, I'm just kidding. But trips not advised about things like study abroad program, will probably be a good way to characterize it, or maybe even a field study or a first-year seminar. But it's important to use the correct terminology in promoting study abroad events. In terms of organizing study abroad programs, we spoke about using outside resources, private sector companies, which tend to be for profits. Rich was like, that's probably a good way to go at the beginning. But once, the programs are established, there are organizations and associations that can be leveraged in arranging study abroad opportunities. We spoke about, the difficulty of extending study, of globalizing the curriculum in more apprenticeship, workforce-ready programs, but the consensus was that needs to be done, and the way needs to be found to do that. So, well, I guess that's how I can summarize, all my 38 points. Like I said, I'll write them up as bullet points. I'm not going to flesh them out, they're just going to be bullet points. Hopefully when you get that document, you'll be able to recall, the details, but I'll try and get it to you tomorrow, no, by Tuesday next week.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening to me.
No, thank you for summarizing it. It was a lot of information to digest and keep track of. Thank you. I passed out a handout. I'm not sure if there were enough of the PowerPoint. I'm happy to share that if you just email me. I'm at rjohnson, JOHNSON, @harpercollege.edu. It's also the last slide of the PowerPoint if you happen to get that. But I'm happy to share it with you as a PowerPoint, PDF, whatever you want. What's that sass down there?
Sass.
Administrators, boy, I'll tell you.
Well, I guess I'm next up, just a few closing remarks. And I want to, again, thank you everyone for being here. I think this is a very enlightening, engaging conversation. I know, a lot of inspirational ideas was to learn from Harper, and I was very, very impressed. I think we all have some practices that are, maybe best practices, but we also can all improve and learn from each other. So I hope this will not be the end of the, network. We can be our own regional, local network of practitioners, scholars who are trying to promote globalization, institutionalization of curriculum, and our programs. And in the end, really the outcome is help our students be better citizens and more prepared for the careers that are whatever their major is. So I really thank Dr. Johnson, Dr. Cannell, and all the Harper College representative here for the wonderful work you do, and that you're willing to share with us your motto. So just as a token of appreciation for a bag, but this I think is a better container.
Thank you. Oh, it's great. I love the tie too. I didn't wear one today.
That was a hint.
Yes.
He'll come properly dressed next time.
Directors wear ties.
He's gonna go back to coordinator.
So if we have this room for another hour, and there's still refreshments. So if you're welcome to stay and just mingle and talk to each other if you didn't have a chance to. I think this is a great opportunity for us to get together and build this community. So hope to see you at other events. We will probably join the ISIP, so we'll probably see some of you at that venue. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Very good.